Hello and welcome. Today we want to do a couple of things. The first is to propose a phase one short-term path and rationale for that path. We'd like to discuss longer-term goals with some of our colleagues who are here at this webinar. We'd like to get your feedback and suggestions on the path and rationale we're suggesting, and hopefully we can identify some concrete next steps. Our premise is that we know more together than any one of us does alone, but knowing together means or assumes that we have a shared understanding and a level of social awareness that's really pretty hard to come by these days. And that's because there is just so much happening right now. Libraries and librarians are engaged in data refuge events. More people than ever are tuned into the good work being done at end-of-term archive and adding seeds. And while the immediate term grabs our attention, it's important to be cognizant of the critical work that our colleagues have been doing over the past 2 decades, really, in born digital federal data. And there's this interesting paradox that seems to be occurring, at least in this moment for us, and that is that there are a lot of people doing really important and good work harvesting this digital data, and there are a lot of people offering to help and build on that good work. And our challenge then is, how do we bring those two things together? It's not simple. And so what we're hoping to do as a group with all of you is to use this good energy that is flowing through and direct it for greater impact. So this quote from David Kelly from IDEO about muddling forward helps me frame the way I think about the challenges ahead of us. There's this natural tension that we have, right, between acting quickly and getting as much information and data as we can right now, and also acting in ways that will set us up for long-term success, right, thoughtfully and deliberately. Life is messy. Sometimes the best that you can do is to accept that it's messy, try to love it as much as you can, and move forward. Today's webinar really is about muddling forward in this really short term. We call it the phase one grab and go phase. We're encouraged by how many people are thinking about phase two, which we imagine as the long-term infrastructure, practices, the sustainability and policies that all need to be in place. So in the spirit of muddling forward in the immediate term, we'd like to propose the following: an approach, 3 tasks in particular, and a process. So our approach in the short term right now is that we default toward action that is systematically grounded. And it's systematically grounded in terms of these 3 tasks. One is a spreadsheet, the second is web archiving, and the third is data refuge. And we want to acknowledge publicly that we understand that born digital federal data and information is a huge and dynamic and complex problem, and that in order to address any piece of this challenge, we've got to slice it and dice it. And so we are slicing the challenge up in these ways, and we recognize we are only addressing a portion of the problem. So let's look at each briefly. As people were working on data refuge projects, it seemed that there was no comprehensive list of government sites or pages that could or should be archived against which we could benchmark. And that's, of course, for good reason, right? There are a lot of pages, a lot of site, a lot of data, and it can become very overwhelming very quickly. It seems that without some sort of system level view of the structure and the depth of these sites, it's difficult to know where the data lives that can't be web archived. Relying on researchers, librarians, and scientists to nominate pages and data sets is a very useful approach, and it has worked, but we thought it could be complemented by this type of systematic documentation of pages. So if we had some comprehensive list, we thought it would allow us to share the work, share responsibility, distribute the workload, have broad coverage with minimal duplication in a systematic way. So we think that this would help us generate more social awareness about what's been done and what remains. However, what is done, and I put that in air quotes, done is something we all need to define. It could also be used later to create a finding aid of URLs for researchers who are using the Wayback Machine and are going to need those URLs to find information. So now let's move to the second task, and that is web archiving. The reason we're proposing web archiving is that Archivit is a common tool that many libraries have already. And if we understand the challenge correctly, that this could be used to complement the web archiving that's been happening through end-of-term harvest and other initiatives. If we were to do this, we could potentially go deeper in these websites. We could archive them more frequently. And importantly, in the process of archiving these sites, we will surface those uncrawlables or the data that cannot be web archived. We thought that there were some win-wins in this and that it gets more people across our library system involved in the work. And that should we need to archive things quickly, in theory, knowing that we've each claimed different pieces of the web to archive, we could do that relatively quickly. And keep in mind, as I present these ideas, we really want you to find the flaws in our assumptions and help us change and make this better. So now let's look at the uncrawlables. That's not going to be the topic of today's short webinar. It's too big for this, but it is the next step in this. And so the uncrawlables are these kinds of data and information. Drop-down menus and query tools, animations, embedded maps, iframes, applications. So when you see something like this, it triggers you to recognize it needs to be harvested in a different way from web archiving. In the data refuge process, which is harvest, verify, save, and share, quality assurance process is where we most need librarians and archivists. Their work in checking data provides confidence and trust that the data collected is of high quality, and this is so important to the process. And so this is something that we would like to talk about in another webinar. Please check our assumptions. I would like to end with these three, and if they're flawed, we want to hear from you. The first assumption is that we think from a systems level view, there is value in documenting as much of the federal websites as we can quickly and then using it to document the level of web archiving that has been completed. Penn Libraries will work to complete this spreadsheet this week. The second assumption is that research libraries have Archivit accounts and we should use them because federal websites are too deep and changing too quickly for us not to use them. Additionally, it enables us to re-archive sites more frequently with less effort, and each of us can make that decision as we like to re-archive in ways that make sense for our communities and our resources. The third assumption, within our library staff, there is so much expertise about what data sets are valuable and vulnerable. Undertaking this project together can help us build a shared understanding and make that understanding much more public than it has been previously. Thank you for listening. I look forward to your feedback, and I'm going to turn it over now to Sarah, who's going to talk about the process for using the spreadsheet.